I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I love you so much. Keep your paperwork safe, Helen. Documentation is protection. James's words echo in my mind as I trace my fingers over our wedding photo. His smile, frozen in time, still makes my heart ache even 3 years after his passing. In the picture, we're standing in front of our first house in Riverside Heights, the one we purchased in 1985 with his VA loan. We were so young then, so full of hope. My name is Helen Chambers, and at 68, I never expected to find myself in this position, a widow fighting for dignity, in a house that doesn't feel like home anymore. James and I built a good life together. Nothing extravagant, but solid. After his military service, he worked construction while I was a registered nurse until our son Brandon was born. Then came our daughters, Rachel and Amanda. Like millions of women of my generation, I made the choice to stay home. James's income was enough, and the children needed me. I never regretted it, not once. We scrimped and saved, and in 1985, we bought our 3-bedroom house in Riverside Heights. James was so proud that day, holding the deed in his hands. "This is our security, Helen," he said, his eyes shining. "Whatever happens, we own this. Nobody can take it away." The house was paid off in 2010. I still remember our little celebration, just the two of us by then, with the kids grown and gone. James grilled steaks, and I made his favorite potato salad. We danced in the kitchen to our wedding song. 6 years later, the diagnosis came: lung cancer. The doctor said it was from his time in Vietnam, all those chemicals he'd been exposed to. My strong, vibrant husband fought so hard right until the end. 40 years of marriage, gone in 18 months of hospital visits, chemotherapy, and hospice care. After the funeral, I tried living alone, but the house felt too big, too quiet. I'd find myself talking to James's empty chair, making coffee for 2 out of habit. The silence was deafening. When Brandon suggested I move in with them, it seemed like a blessing. "Just until you're feeling stronger," he said, his hand on mine. "It's not good for you to be alone right now." Sophie, my daughter-in-law, nodded enthusiastically beside him. "The kids miss their grandma. It would be so nice to have you close." My grandchildren, Ryan and Emily, sealed the deal with their excited faces. How could I say no? I sold most of my furniture, donated James's tools to the local veterans group, and kept only what would fit in their guest room. The house in Riverside Heights stood empty, but I couldn't bear to sell it. Too many memories. Brandon said they'd help me figure out what to do with it later. "We'll take care of everything, Mom," he promised. "You just focus on healing." I should have remembered James's words about documentation then. But grief has a way of clouding judgment, of making you trust when you should question. The first 6 months with Brandon and Sophie were lovely. I cooked Sunday dinners, helped with the grandchildren's homework, and felt useful again. Sophie would chat with me over morning coffee, asking about my life with James, seeming genuinely interested. My grandchildren, Ryan, 10, and Emily, 8, would burst into my room on weekends, crawling into bed with me for stories about their father when he was their age. I thought I'd found my place again, a new chapter. Brandon worked as an engineer at Boeing, good, steady work that he'd had for 15 years. Sophie had been in marketing at a local firm when I first moved in, but shortly after she received a promotion to marketing director. I was happy for her success, even proud. She'd worked hard for it. My daughters lived far away, Rachel in Boston, going through a difficult divorce, and Amanda in Seattle with twins who had special needs. We talked on the phone regularly, but they had their own challenges. When I'd hint at any problems, they'd say, "At least you're with Brandon." "You're so lucky Sophie's there to help." Lucky. The word would later taste like ash in my mouth. I kept in touch with a few friends from our old neighborhood, especially Evelyn Martinez, who'd known James and me for 30 years. She visited occasionally, bringing homemade empanadas and news from Riverside Heights. The Thompson house sold, she'd tell me. The new family has 3 young children. The neighborhood is changing, Helen. But whenever she'd ask how I was settling in, I'd smile and say everything was fine. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. The truth was, things were already beginning to shift. Sophie started making comments about the extra laundry, the higher water, bills. She'd sigh when she saw me in the kitchen, as if my presence exhausted her. The warmth in her voice had cooled to politeness, then to barely concealed irritation. Brandon grew distant, too. Always busy with work, avoiding my eyes when Sophie complained about the situation. I should have seen the signs, the way Sophie's mouth tightened when the grandkids ran to hug me. How she'd started calling me your mother when talking to Brandon, never mom anymore. One evening, I found a stack of nursing home brochures in the recycling bin. When I mentioned it casually at dinner, Sophie quickly explained, "Oh, that's research for work. We have a client in senior living." I nodded and pretended to believe her. But that night, I lay awake wondering what was really happening in this house that wasn't mine. James had always insisted we keep our important documents secure. I'd brought all our papers when I moved, stored them in a lock under my bed. But I'd been so grateful for the illusion of family that I hadn't thought to review them. I trusted my son. I believed family meant something. I was about to learn how wrong I was. The real shift accelerated about a year after I moved in, coinciding with Sophie's promotion. The money changed her. Or maybe it just revealed who she'd always been. She started redecorating, hiring contractors, talking about elevating their lifestyle. Every room got a makeover except mine, which remained pointedly shabby, like a reminder of my unwelcome presence. Brandon's salary was good, but nothing compared to Sophie's new income. I watched my son shrink as his wife's star rose. She controlled the finances, made the decisions, and he just nodded along. The boy who'd once stood up to bullies in 3rd grade couldn't meet his wife's eyes anymore. One night, I'd come downstairs for water and froze outside their bedroom door when I heard Sophie's voice sharp and clear. "Your mother is becoming a burden," she was saying. "She contributes nothing. Brandon just sits here using our resources, taking up space." "She's my mom," Brandon replied weakly, "and I'm your wife, your family now. We have our own kids to think about. College funds, retirement savings. We can't keep hemorrhaging money on someone who refuses to help herself. Hemorrhaging money. I bought my own groceries, paid for my medications, never asked for a dime. But that didn't fit Sophie's narrative. The next morning, Sophie was all smiles over coffee, asking about my plans for the day as if I hadn't heard her true feelings hours before. I smiled back and lied about meeting Evelyn for lunch. Instead, I went to the local library and researched housing options for seniors. The prices made my stomach clench. My Social Security and James's modest pension wouldn't cover half of what these places charged. Without selling the house in Riverside Heights, I had no way to afford anywhere decent. When I returned, Sophie was showing off the newly remodeled kitchen to her book club friends. I slipped past them to my room, but not before I heard her say, "This is my house now. I've made it what it should have been all along." My house. The words echoed in my head that night as I looked at my wedding photo. James smiled back at me, frozen in time, unaware of what would become of his Helen. The restrictions began subtly. Sophie reorganized the kitchen so that most items were in higher cabinets I couldn't reach easily. The laundry room suddenly had a schedule posted, with my allotted time being when everyone was home and needing the bathroom. "Grammy, why don't you eat dinner with us anymore?" Emily asked one evening when I took my plate to my room. "Grammy needs her rest," Sophie answered before I could. "She's tired." But I wasn't tired. I was being erased. One evening, I found Sophie on her laptop browsing nursing homes. "Research for work," she said quickly, slamming it shut. But I'd seen the search terms, Medicare beds available and expedited placement. When I mentioned this to Evelyn during our next lunch, her eyes narrowed. "Helen, something's not right there. You look thin and sad. What's really going on?" I hesitated, then told her everything. The comments, the changes, the feeling of being unwelcome in what was supposed to be my sanctuary. Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know where I am if you need anything. James would want someone looking out for you." The house remodeling continued. Sophie put in a pool, a home theater in the basement, updated bathrooms with rainfall showers and heated floors. One day, while showing it off to her colleagues, I heard her say, "The equity was just sitting there unused. We decided to put it to work." Equity? What equity? Brandon and Sophie didn't own a home before I moved in. They'd been renting. The only equity would be from my house. But how? That night, I checked my lockbox. The deed to the Riverside Heights house was there, with both James's name and mine on it. But something made me look closer. There was a small notation I didn't recognize, and the document looked different somehow, not quite the same as I remembered. I needed to find out what was happening, but I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. As summer turned to fall, the tension in the house became palpable. Sophie spent more time at work, coming home late and irritable. Brandon walked on eggshells around her, and the children grew quieter. Sensing the strain, my relationship with my grandchildren became Sophie's new target. She scheduled their activities during times I was usually with them. When Ryan asked if I could attend his soccer game, Sophie interjected. "Gigi doesn't like sitting in the cold, honey. She's better off at home." I hadn't been asked. I would have sat in a blizzard to watch my grandson play. Emily's art projects with me were suddenly too messy for the house. Our cookie baking sessions interfered with Sophie's new clean eating initiative. Every connection I had with the children was systematically undermined. One evening, I overheard Ryan asking Brandon, "Dad, does Grammy not like us anymore?" Brandon's reply was muffled, but I caught Sophie's addition. "Grammy's getting older, sweetie. Sometimes older people get confused and forgetful. It's not her fault." The implication was clear. She was laying groundwork, creating a narrative of my declining mental state. I wasn't imagining things. The next day, I found my pill organizer rearranged. Small items in my room were moved. My grocery list left on the counter disappeared, with Sophie claiming I must have thrown it away. "It's happening a lot lately," she told Brandon with exaggerated concern. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Morris about it." Gaslighting. I'd read about it in a magazine at my doctor's office, never thinking I'd experience it firsthand, especially not from family. Evelyn noticed my increasing anxiety when we met for coffee. "Helen, you need to protect yourself," she said firmly. "Something's not right with that daughter-in-law of yours." "What can I do?" I asked, feeling trapped. "I can't afford to move out, not with today's rental prices, and the girls are too far away." "What about your house, the one in Riverside?" "Heights?" I sighed. "Brandon said they'd help me figure out what to do with it, but every time I bring it up, Sophie changes the subject." Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "Helen, whose name is on that deed?" "Mine." "Well, mine and James's, but with James gone, I suppose it's just mine." "No suppose about it. That's your house, your asset. Why are you living like a beggar when you own property?" The question hung between us. Why indeed? Because I'd been so grateful for the illusion of family that I'd forgotten my own worth. Because grief had made me vulnerable, willing to accept crumbs of affection. "I need to look into this," I said finally. Evelyn nodded. "Yes, you do. And fast." When I returned home, Sophie was waiting, arms crossed. "Your friend Evelyn called. Said you left your scarf at the restaurant." The hair on the back of my neck rose. I hadn't worn a scarf. Evelyn was creating a reason to call, checking on me. "That was thoughtful of her," I said carefully. "I don't like her," Sophie stated flatly. "She seems nosy, always asking questions about our business. She's an old friend." "Well, maybe it's time for new friends, ones who understand boundaries." Sophie's smile didn't reach her eyes. By the way, we're having a dinner party Saturday. I'll need you to stay in your room that evening. My colleagues are coming and it would be awkward. Awkward. I was now an embarrassment to be hidden away. That night I heard Sophie and Brandon arguing downstairs. She's getting suspicious, Sophie hissed. That Martinez woman has been filling her head with ideas. What do you expect? Brandon's voice was uncharacteristically heated. You're treating her like she's invisible. She's my mother, Sophie, and this is my house now. I've put every cent of my bonus into it. Without me, you'd still be in that crappy apartment. The house is still in her name. We agreed to talk to her about it properly. Sophie's laugh was cold. Talk, and what would you say? Hey, Mom, remember that house Dad left you? We've been borrowing against it without telling you. Hope that's okay. My blood ran cold. Borrowing against my house. How is that possible? We'll figure it out, Brandon said, his voice dropping. Just be nicer to her. Okay, for the kids. If nothing else, 2 more months, Sophie replied. Then, we execute the plan. Harris says the paperwork is almost ready. Harris, Sophie's cousin who worked at a law firm. What paperwork? I slipped back to my room, heart pounding. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I needed to act, but carefully. Whatever they were planning, I couldn't tip my hand too soon. That weekend, while everyone was at Ryan's soccer tournament, I visited my old house in Riverside Heights. The lawn was overgrown, mail piled up on the porch. Inside, dust covered every surface, but it was still mine, still home. I walked through each room slowly, remembering James and I bringing baby Brandon home, Rachel's 5th birthday party in the backyard, Amanda learning to play piano in the living room. Every wall held memories that Sophie couldn't redesign away. As I was leaving, my neighbor Dorothy stepped out of her house. Helen, what a sight for sore eyes. Are you moving back in? Just checking on things, I said vaguely. Well, it's about time. That young couple was here again last week, said they were considering an offer. My heart stuttered. Young couple? Your son and his wife said they had your power of attorney and were handling the sale for you since you weren't well. Power of attorney sale. I'd signed no such document. When was this? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Oh, they've been by several times over the past few months. Brought some fancy-looking fellow in a suit last time. Realtor? I guess. I thanked her and hurried to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely find my keys. The pieces weren't just falling into place. They were crashing down around me. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were a masterclass in restraint. I watched, I listened, and I documented everything. I recorded dates, conversations, and discovered financial statements hidden in Brandon's home office during a rare moment alone. I took photos with my old flip phone, not sophisticated, but evidence nonetheless. Sophie's behavior oscillated between pointed ignoring and false concern, especially when others were present. Are you feeling all right, Helen? You seem confused today, she'd say sweetly in front of Brandon's cousin Maria, who was visiting from Chicago. Maria frowned. She seems perfectly fine to me. Oh, you don't see her every day, Sophie sighed dramatically. The forgetfulness, the wandering at night, it's becoming a concern. I held my tongue, knowing confrontation would only play into her narrative of my declining mental state. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and clear. I was up early, helping prepare the turkey as I had every year since moving in. Sophie supervised, criticizing my every move while simultaneously telling her sister on the phone how we let Helen help with little tasks to make her feel useful. Family began arriving at 4. Brandon's Uncle Thomas and Aunt Maria, cousins from both sides, Sophie's parents, her brother with his wife and children, 15 people in total, all squeezed around the dining table with the kids' table set up nearby. I'd been seated at the far end, away from my grandchildren, who kept trying to sneak over to me until Sophie redirected them. The turkey I'd helped prepare that morning suddenly tasted like sawdust as I watched my family, my son interact as if I were merely an obligation, not a loved one. Midway through the meal, Sophie clinked her glass. Everyone, Brandon and I have an announcement. All eyes turned to them. Brandon looked uncomfortable, but Sophie was beaming. We've decided to expand the house. We're adding a mother-in-law suite over the garage. Much more appropriate accommodations for Helen than taking up our guest room. Murmurs of approval circulated the table. How thoughtful, Sophie's mother cooed. That sounds lovely, I said carefully. When did you decide this? We've been planning for months, Sophie replied. The contractors start in January. And how will you be financing this renovation? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Sophie's smile tightened imperceptibly. We have it handled, Helen. Don't worry your head about money matters. I'm just curious since my name is still on the deed to my house in Riverside Heights, and I'm wondering if that has anything to do with your sudden financial flexibility. The table went silent. Sophie's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Your free ride is over. Helen, she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. Starting next month, that guest room costs $2,300. That's actually below market rate. I'm being generous. 15 family members went completely still, forks suspended midair, eyes darting between Sophie and me. Brandon kept his gaze fixed on his mashed potatoes. I'm sorry. What? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Sophie dabbed her lips with her napkin, those perfectly manicured nails catching the light. You heard me. $2,300 a month for the guest room. If you can't afford it, there's always the shelter downtown. They have programs for seniors. Maria gasped. Sophie, that's practical. Sophie cut her off. We can't keep supporting a freeloader forever. Freeloader. After 40 years of marriage, after raising 3 children, after giving up my nursing career to support James's military service, after losing him to cancer, I was a freeloader in my own home. My hands trembled as I set down my fork. This was my house. The house James and I had bought in 1985. The house where we'd raised our 3 children. The house I'd moved back into with them after James died 3 years ago, when they said I shouldn't be alone. Mother, we've prepared a rental agreement, Sophie continued, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she'd perfected. It's very reasonable. First month's rent due, December 1st. Sophie, Thomas began, his voice tight with disapproval. No, it's time we address this, Sophie insisted. Helen has been living here rent-free for 3 years while we pay the mortgage, insurance, utilities, everything. It's not sustainable. What mortgage? I asked quietly. My house was paid off in 2010. Sophie's eyes narrowed. This house, Helen, our house, where you're living now. I thought you were renting this house, I said, looking at Brandon. That's what you told me when I moved in. Brandon finally looked up, his face pale. Mom, it's complicated. Actually, it's very simple, I said, finding my voice. I'd like to know how you're financing all these renovations, the pool, the kitchen, the home theater. Because from what I understand, you've been taking out loans using my house as collateral, my house, with forged documents. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily started to cry softly at the kids' table, sensing the tension. Ryan put his arm around his sister protectively. Sophie recovered first, letting out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. That's ridiculous. Brandon, your mother is clearly confused. This is exactly why we're concerned about her mental state. I'm not confused, Sophie. I spoke with my neighbor Dorothy this week. She told me about the young couple with power of attorney looking to sell my house. I never signed any power of attorney. Sophie's face hardened. This is a private family matter that we should discuss later. No, I said firmly. You made it public when you called me a freeloader in front of everyone. Let's continue. Tell me about the credit cards opened in my name. The ones with $20,000 in charges for your designer clothes and that vacation to Cabo you took in June. Brandon's cousin whispered, Holy, under his breath. Mom, Brandon finally spoke, his voice pleading. We should talk about this privately. Like you talked privately about stealing my identity, about forging my signature, about planning to declare me incompetent so you could take control of my assets? That's enough. Sophie slammed her hand on the table. I will not be accused of crimes in my own home. It's not your home, I said quietly, pulling a folded paper from my pocket. I ran a title search. This house is in my name, too. You used my house as collateral for the loan to buy this one. The color drained from Sophie's face. Brandon looked like he might be sick. You've been planning this for years, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Using my credit, my assets, creating debt in my name, and when I couldn't pay, you'd have me declared incompetent. Take everything I have. Is that about right? Maria stood abruptly. Thomas, we're leaving. Helen, call us later. We'll help, however. We can. Sophie tried one last defense. She's lying. She's confused. Tell them, Brandon. All eyes turned to my son. In that moment, he looked so much like the little boy who'd broken Mrs. Peterson's window with a baseball and had to confess. Torn. Guilty but knowing the right thing to do. It's true, he whispered. All of it. It was Sophie's idea, but I went along with it. Sophie's face contorted with rage. You weak, pathetic... That's enough, Thomas said firmly. Children, get your coats. We're leaving. As family. Members hurriedly gathered their things. Sophie turned her fury on me. You've ruined everything after all we've done for you. You ungrateful. What you've done, I interrupted calmly, is commit fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. All federal crimes. I stood, legs shaky but resolved. You have until December 1st to vacate my house, both houses. Actually, I'll be contacting my attorney in the morning. Sophie laughed, high and brittle. You don't have an attorney. You can barely afford your blood pressure medication. James's friend, Charles Bennett, has been quite interested in the documents I've gathered. He's expecting my call. I walked to my room, closing the door on their voices, Sophie's shrill accusations, Brandon's weak attempts to calm her, the shuffle of departing family members. Through the thin walls, I heard Maria arguing my case, Thomas's deeper tones of disapproval, and most telling of all, Brandon's silence. On my dresser sat the photo from my last Thanksgiving with James. We'd been at this same table, in this same house, but everything had been different then. James's arm around me, Brandon smiling genuinely, even Sophie looking pleasant. How had it come to this? I didn't return to the chaos outside my door. Later, Brandon knocked softly. Mom, I brought you a plate. I opened the door, saw his face, my boy looking lost and ashamed. How could you let her speak to me that way? I asked, the hurt finally breaking through my calm facade. He set the plate on my dresser. Wouldn't meet my eyes. She's stressed about money. The promotion came with more responsibilities. She meant every word. I studied his face, saw James's jaw, my eyes, but none of our strength. What happened to you, Brandon? Just think about the rental agreement. Okay, it's not that much, and you have Dad's pension, Social Security. Get out. The words came out, flat, final. Mom, get out of my room. He left, shoulders slumped. I looked at the plate. He'd brought turkey, stuffing, all the fixings, food I'd helped prepare in the kitchen where I now needed privileges. I pushed it aside. That night, I lay awake thinking about James's words. Documentation is protection. But protection from what? He'd never imagined I'd need protection from our own son. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. We're here for you. Whatever you need, that woman is poison. At least someone still believed in family. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, legal battles, pain. But tonight, looking at James's handwriting on the deed, Helen, this is yours always. Don't let anyone take it from you. All my love, Jay, I found the strength to fight. Black Friday dawned cold and gray, matching my mood perfectly. While others battled crowds for bargains, I faced a different kind of fight. I'd barely slept, rehearsing what needed to be done, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. Sophie knocked on my door at precisely 7 REO, rental agreement in hand, smile bright as her whitened teeth. Sleep well? She didn't wait for an answer, spreading papers on my dresser with practiced efficiency. I've made this very simple. First month's rent due December 1st, security deposit waived, family discount. She pointed with a manicured fingernail. Sign here, initial here. I took the document, scanning each line carefully. No overnight guests without approval, no cooking after 8 p.m., no use of common areas during family time, a curfew, an actual curfew of 9 p.m. Looking up at her, I said, "This is reality." Sophie's smile never wavered. "You've had a free ride for 3 years. Time to adult up, Helen. Adult up." I'd been an adult when she was still in diapers. I'd raised 3 children, managed a household, held my husband's hand through chemotherapy. But to her, I was just an old woman who needed to learn responsibility. What if I refuse? Then you'll need to vacate by December 1st. She pulled out her phone, showing me a moving company's website. I've already got quotes, very reasonable. They can have you packed and out in 3 hours. Brandon agreed to this. Brandon agrees with whatever's best for our family. She leaned against my doorframe, casual as a neighbor chatting over coffee. Look, Helen, I'm trying to help you maintain some dignity here. The alternative is, well, less pleasant. Meaning, I've toured some lovely facilities. Golden Sunset has an opening. Medicare covers most of it. You'd have your own space, smaller of course, but manageable. Meals provided, activities, people your own age, a nursing home. The words tasted bitter. Assisted living, she corrected with a patronizing smile. Very different. More independence. She tilted her head, studying me. You have been forgetting things lately, leaving the stove on, missing medications. Maybe more support would be beneficial. I hadn't forgotten anything, but I saw the trap. Refuse the rent, get painted as incompetent, pay the rent, legitimize her claim to my house. Either way, she won. I need time to think. Of course, you have 5 days. She set the papers on my nightstand, patting them like a pet. Oh, and I'll need you out of the house tomorrow afternoon. We're having friends over, and it would be awkward. After she left, I sat on my bed holding James's picture. What would he do? Fight, certainly. But how could I fight when my own son wouldn't stand up for me? I called Rachel first, my hands shaking as I dialed. Honey, I need to talk to you about something. Mom, can it wait? The lawyers hear about the divorce papers? It's important. Sophie wants me to pay rent. A pause. Well, that's not unreasonable, is it? I mean, you are living there. My heart sank. Rachel, it's $2,300. Oh, that's a lot. But you have Dad's benefits, right? Maybe it's time to think about your own place anyway. Might be nice having your independence. Back. Independence. As if I'd chosen independence. As if I hadn't been forced into this corner by grief and loneliness and the promise of family support. Amanda was no better when I reached her. Mom, I can't deal with this right now. The twins have therapy. And look, maybe Sophie has a point. You could contribute something. I do contribute. I mean real contribution. Real contribution? 40 years of keeping house, raising kids, supporting my husband's career. None of that was real to them. Only money counted now. I hung up, feeling more alone than I had since James's funeral. My daughters, my son. When had they all become strangers? I needed to act, but carefully. Sophie was building a case against me, documenting supposed memory lapses, creating a paper trail to support her claim of my incompetence. I needed to build my own case. That afternoon, I went to the bank. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, noticed my hands shaking as I filled out the withdrawal slip. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Chambers?" "No," I wanted to say. "Nothing is okay." Instead, I smiled. "Just need to check my balance." The numbers on the screen mocked me. Social Security, $400 a month. James's pension, $800. Savings, $5,000. Enough to pay Sophie's rent for 2 months. Maybe 3 if I ate ramen and skipped medications. Then what? "Would you like to speak with a financial advisor?" the teller asked gently. "No, thank you." What could an advisor tell me? That I was old, poor, and out of options? I drove past Golden Sunset on the way home. A gray building with tiny windows. Residents shuffling in the garden like ghosts. Was this my future warehoused? Forgotten. While Sophie lived in my house, when I returned, the house was empty. A note on the counter informed me that they'd gone. To the mall. Shopping with my credit, no doubt. I seized the opportunity to search Brandon's home office, looking for anything that might explain how they'd managed to use my house as collateral. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a folder labeled Riverside Property. Inside were loan applications, credit reports, and, most damning of all, practice sheets where someone had attempted to copy my signature. My hands trembled as I photographed each document with my phone. The evidence was mounting, but I still needed professional help to understand the full scope of what they'd done. That evening, while Brandon and Sophie entertained friends, I sat in my car at the park, too ashamed to let Evelyn see me cry, but desperate for advice. She found me there anyway and knocked on my window. "Helen, honey, what are you doing out here in the cold?" I broke down then, told her everything, the rental agreement, the nursing home threats, my children's dismissal of my concerns. She listened, her face growing harder with each word. "That witch," she said when I finished. "James would be spinning in his grave." "What can I do, Evelyn? I can't afford the rent. My kids think I'm a burden. I have nowhere to go." "What about your house, the one in Riverside Heights? It's just sitting empty. Brandon said they'd help me figure out what to do with it." Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "Helen, whose name is on that deed?" "Mine?" "Well, mine and James's, but James is gone, so it's mine. No buts. That's your house, your asset. Why are you living like a beggar when you own property?" The question hung between us. Why indeed? Because I'd been so grateful for the illusion of family that I'd forgotten my own worth. "I need to think," I said finally. Evelyn squeezed my shoulder. "Think fast, honey. And remember, James left you more than memories. He left you security. Use it." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the deed, the papers in my lockbox. James's voice echoed, "Documentation is protection." At 3 a.m., I pulled out the lockbox, entered the combination, our anniversary date. Inside, neat folders labeled in James's precise handwriting: insurance, military records, medical, and their property. I opened it with trembling fingers and pulled out the deed to the Riverside Heights house. Our names in official type, James. Edward Chambers and Helen Marie Chambers. And below that, in James's writing, a note. "Helen, this is yours always. Don't let anyone take it from you. All my love, Jay." I pressed the paper to my chest and wept. Then I started planning. At first, light. I called Charles Bennett, James's old friend from the military who'd become an attorney. He agreed to meet me that morning at his office. "Bring everything you have," he instructed. "Every document, every note, every statement. If what you're telling me is true, we need to act quickly." I gathered my evidence, the original deed, bank, statements, the rental agreement, photos of the practice signature sheets, and slipped out of the house before anyone else was awake. I left a note saying I was meeting Evelyn for breakfast. Charles's office was in a modest building downtown. He was older than I remembered, white-haired now, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were sharp. He listened without interruption, as I explained everything, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Helen, what they're doing is criminal. Identity theft, fraud, elder abuse. These are serious federal offenses." He leaned forward. "Are you certain you want to pursue this? It would mean pressing charges against your own son." The question gave me pause. Despite everything, Brandon was still my child. The little boy who'd cried when James left for work trips, who'd made me handprint cards for every Mother's Day. But he was also the man who'd sat silent while his wife called me a freeloader, who'd participated in stealing my identity, who'd betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way. "I'm certain," I said finally. "I need to protect myself." Charles nodded. "Then let's begin. First, we'll run a title search on both properties. Then we'll check your credit report for unauthorized accounts. We'll need to document everything thoroughly." The title search revealed what I'd suspected. My house in Riverside Heights had been used as collateral for a home equity loan of $150,000, which had then been used as a down payment on the house I was currently living in. Somehow, they'd managed to add Brandon's name to my deed, likely with forged documents making the loan possible. "The good news," Charles said, reviewing the results, "is that the forgery is obvious when compared to your actual signature. The bad news is that they've been systematically building a case to have you declared incompetent." "How do you know?" He pushed a folder across his desk. "We subpoenaed records from your doctor's office. There have been calls from Sophie expressing concern about your declining mental state. She's requested cognitive assessments and documented supposed incidents of confusion. She's laying groundwork." My stomach churned. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. "There's more," Charles continued, grimly. "We pulled your credit report. 3 credit cards opened in your name that you never authorized. Current balance just over $20,000, plus inquiries from reverse mortgage companies and senior living facilities checking your creditworthiness." I felt dizzy with the implications. How long has this been going on? Based on the timestamps, about 2 years. Shortly after you moved in with them, 2 years of smiles and family dinners and, "How are you, Mom?" and while plotting my destruction. The scope of betrayal took my breath away. "What do we do now?" Charles's expression was resolute. "We fight. First, we secure your assets. Then, we address the criminal aspects." He outlined a plan: freeze my credit, file fraud alerts, secure new identification documents, prepare legal paperwork to reclaim sole ownership of my house, and gather evidence for criminal charges. "What about the house I'm living in now?" Sophie said they've been paying the mortgage. They have, but using fraudulently obtained funds legally. You have a claim to that property as well, since your assets were used for the down payment without your knowledge or consent. My head was spinning with legal terms and implications. This is going to destroy my family. Charles's gaze was sympathetic but firm. "Helen, they were already destroying it. You're just refusing to be the casualty." As I left his office, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. The path forward was clear, but the emotional toll would be immense. Charles had arranged for a forensic accountant named Patricia Wong to review my financial records. I met her that afternoon at her downtown office. Patricia was a petite woman with shrewd eyes behind stylish glasses. "The fraud is extensive," she said, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the documents. 3 credit cards, multiple loan applications, several attempts to add Sophie as co-owner of your property. The paper trail is damning. How did I not know? I still felt foolish, exposed. They were careful, had mail redirected, used electronic. Statements, intercepted calls. Patricia's voice gentled. "This wasn't impulse, Mrs. Chambers. This was a calculated campaign to strip you of assets." "When did it start?" Patricia pulled out a timeline. Best we can tell, about 6 months after you moved in. The first credit card application coincides with Sophie's promotion. 6 months. When she'd still been smiling at me over coffee, calling me mom, pretending to care. The betrayal cut fresh. What's our next move? I filed the criminal complaints. Today, Charles said, joining us. Fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, attempted grand larceny. The DA's office is very interested. Elder abuse is a hot-button issue right now. What about Brandon? Charles and Patricia exchanged glances. He's harder to prosecute. No direct evidence he forged anything, though he clearly knew. Accomplice charges are possible, but Charles hesitated. Jurors hate sending sons to jail for obeying wives. I finished, essentially. Yes. I thought about Brandon sobbing in my doorway. The boy I'd raised versus the man he'd become. File against both. Let the courts decide. Charles nodded. There's something else. Sophie's been busy since yesterday. Meaning? Patricia pulled out papers. She filed for emergency conservatorship this morning. Claims you're mentally unstable, that she has power of attorney, that throwing them out was a delusional episode. She's requesting immediate intervention. The audacity stole my breath. Even caught, even exposed, she was still attacking. Can she do that? She can try. Charles's smile was sharp. But we have your medical records, witness statements, and a paper trail showing you're the victim, not the perpetrator. No judge will grant it, but she'll try to make me look crazy. Let her. Patricia leaned forward. Every lie she tells is another nail in her coffin. Document everything. Record if legal in your state. Build the case. I want them to pay. The words came out harder than intended, not just criminally, financially. Every penny they stole. Restitution is standard in fraud cases, Charles assured me, plus damages for emotional distress, legal fees, credit repair. They'll be paying you for years. Good. Let them feel the squeeze of never having enough, always owing, forever indebted. Let Sophie's designer dreams crumble under court-ordered payments. There's more good news, Patricia added. The renovations legally, they're yours. Improvements made to your property with stolen funds revert to you. The pool, the kitchen, everything. Yours, free and clear. I laughed, surprising myself. She built her dream house for me. Karma, Charles said dryly, can be beautiful. We spent hours documenting, planning, strategizing. By evening, I felt armed for war. Charles left to file papers. Patricia stayed to help me understand my finances. You're not rich, she said bluntly, but you're not poor. The house is worth approximately $800,000 now. Thanks to the renovations and market appreciation, your income is limited, but without a mortgage, it's sufficient. $800,000. James and I had paid $90,000 in 1985. He'd be stunned. Could I sell it? Of course, though I'd wait until the legal matters settle. But yes, you could sell. Buy something smaller. Invest the difference. Live very comfortably. Options. After 3 years of feeling trapped, I had options. As I drove back to what I could no longer think of as home, I steeled myself for confrontation. Brandon's car was in the driveway, but Sophie's was gone. I found him in the kitchen, staring into a glass of whiskey. Mom, he looked up, eyes red-rimmed. Where have you been? I've been calling. Meeting with my lawyer. The words hung between us. Brandon's face crumpled. Mom, please. We can work this out. Sophie's just stressed about money. The promotion came with a lot of pressure. She didn't mean half of what she said yesterday. Did she mean to open credit cards in my name, to forge loan documents, to try to steal my house? He flinched at each question. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Brandon, tell me. I'd really like to know the plan. He took a shaky breath. We were going to talk to you about co-signing for the house. Then the market dropped, and we needed more equity. Sophie said it was just temporary, that we'd pay you back once her commissions came through. And the credit. Cards! The conservatorship application? His head jerked up. What conservatorship? Sophie filed papers this morning claiming I'm mentally unstable and need to be under her guardianship. Brandon's face went pale. I didn't know about that, I swear. What did you know, Brandon? What part of stealing from your mother did you actively participate in? He couldn't meet my eyes. I signed some papers. I knew about the home equity loan. I didn't know about the credit cards until later. And by then, it seemed too late to come clean. It's never too late to do the right thing, I said quietly. Your father taught you that. At the mention of James, Brandon's composure broke. Dad would hate me. Yes, he would. The harsh truth hung between us. Brandon drained his glass and poured another. Sophie's at her mother's. She's pretty upset. I'd imagine identity theft charges would upset most people. Brandon's eyes widened. You're really pressing charges? What did you think would happen? That I'd just roll over and let you take everything? That I'd sign your ridiculous rental agreement and pretend this never happened? I hoped we could work something out as a family. Family, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Family doesn't steal from each other, Brandon. Family doesn't forge signatures or open fraudulent credit accounts. Family doesn't try to declare their mother incompetent to gain control of her assets. Brandon hung his head. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't erase the betrayal. I stood, suddenly exhausted. You have until December 1st to find somewhere else to live. Both of you. Mom, please. Goodbye. Brandon. I went to my room and closed the door, blocking out his pleas. My hands were shaking as I sent a text to Charles. Confronted Brandon. He admitted to knowing about the loan, but claims ignorance about conservatorship. Staying in my room tonight. We'll call tomorrow. His response was immediate. Change the locks on Riverside House today. Security system updated. Be careful and document everything. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at James's photo. I'm doing it, I whispered to his smiling face. I'm fighting back. I hope you're proud. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace as I drifted to sleep. The next morning, I woke to shouting. Sophie had returned and was in a full-blown rage downstairs. You told her, you pathetic spineless? Her voice rose to a shriek. Do you have any idea what you've done? Brandon's response was too low to hear, but Sophie's wasn't. They froze our accounts, all of them. My credit cards were declined at the hotel. Do you know how humiliating that was? And it's your fault. I dressed quickly, gathering my essential documents. Whatever happened next, I didn't want to be trapped here. When I emerged from my room, Sophie was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, face contorted with fury. You, she hissed. You ungrateful old witch. After everything we've done for you. After everything you've done to me, I corrected, keeping my voice steady. There's a difference. You think you've won? I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A thief and a fraud. Where are my grandchildren? Her smile was vicious. You think you'll ever see them again after what you've done to their mother? What I've done? That's rich, coming from someone facing federal charges. You'll never make those charges stick. It'll be your word against mine. And who do you think people will believe? A confused old woman with a history of mental instability or a respected professional? I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. App. Thank you for that. My lawyer will be delighted. The color drained from Sophie's face. You can't record me without consent. That's illegal. Actually, in this state, single-party consent is all that's required. I consented. That's enough. I moved past her toward the door. I'll be staying at a hotel until the court date. I suggest you use this time to find new housing arrangements. This isn't over, Sophie called after me. Not by a long shot. I turned, back, meeting her gaze. You're right about that. It's just beginning. Outside, I took my first deep breath in what felt like years. Evelyn was waiting in her car as we'd arranged. You okay? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. No, I admitted, but I will be. We drove to the hotel Charles had reserved for me, a modest place but clean and secure. As we carried my suitcases in, Evelyn squeezed my arm. You're doing the right thing, Helen. Don't doubt that for a second. I know. It just hurts. Of course it does. They're your family. But sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones who wound us deepest. I settled into the hotel room, feeling strangely liberated despite everything for the first time in 3 years. I was making my own decisions, taking back control. My phone rang, Rachel, calling back after I'd left her a brief message about the situation. Mom, what's going on? Brandon called saying, you've gone crazy, hired lawyers, accused them of stealing. I told her everything, my voice steady despite the pain. When I finished, there was a long silence. Rachel, I'm still here. Her voice was thick with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. When you mentioned the rent, I just assumed I should have asked more questions. Yes, you should have. Are you okay? Where are you staying? Do you need me to come? The shift to concern after dismissal was jarring. I'm safe. I have support. And yes, I would have appreciated you coming when I first asked for help, not after everything fell apart. That's not fair, Mom. I'm going through a divorce. I have my own problems. Life is rarely fair, Rachel. But when family needs help, you show up. That's what I taught you. That's what I did for you. Every time. Another silence. You're right. I'll book a flight. Don't bother, I said, suddenly tired. The court date is set for next month. You can come then if you want to support. Me or not. It's your choice. Mom, I need to go. I have another call with my lawyer. I hung up, knowing I'd been harsher than necessary, but unable to summon the energy to soothe her guilt. My daughters had abandoned me when I needed them, just as Brandon had. The wound was still too fresh to pretend otherwise. Amanda called next, her tone defensive from the start. Mom, Brandon says you're pressing charges against him, your own son. Brandon committed crimes, Amanda, multiple federal crimes. It was Sophie's idea. You know how she is. Yes, I do. And I know that Brandon is a grown man who made his choices. He chose to participate in stealing from his mother. People make mistakes. Mistakes are accidental. This was calculated, deliberate, and sustained over years. That's not a mistake. It's a crime. Amanda's voice broke. What do you want me to say? That I should have been there? That I should have noticed I have twins with special needs? Mom, I'm drowning most days. The guilt trip might have worked before, but not now. I'm not asking you to fix this, Amanda. I'm telling you what happened and what I'm doing about it. You can support me or not. That's your choice. Of course I support you, she said quickly. I just hate seeing the family torn apart like this. The family was torn apart the moment they decided to steal from me. I'm just refusing to be the victim. After ending the call with Amanda, I felt emotionally drained, but oddly cleansed. For too long, I'd accepted whatever scraps of attention and affection my children offered, grateful for any acknowledgement. No more. I deserved better. James would expect better. Charles called to update me on the legal proceedings. The emergency conservatorship hearing is set for Monday. Sophie's claiming you've had a mental break, that you're paranoid and delusional. Her cousin Harris is representing her. He's the one who helped with the forged documents. What are our chances? Excellent. We have medical clearance from your doctor confirming your mental competence, plus statements from neighbors and friends attesting to your lucidity. And most damning, we have the paper trail of their fraud. No judge will grant conservatorship to someone who's been systematically defrauding the person they claim to want to protect. And after that, the criminal case moves forward. I won't lie. Helen, it's going to be ugly. They'll attack your character, your memory, your stability. They'll try to paint you as an ungrateful burden who turned on the family that took you in. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Sophie's smug face as she presented the rental agreement, and Brandon's weakness as he stood by and let it. happen. The systematic dismantling of my dignity over 3 long years. I'm prepared, I said firmly. They tried to take everything from me. My home, my independence, my identity. I won't let them take my voice too. That's my girl, Charles said. And for a moment he sounded so much like James that my heart ached. Get some rest. Monday's going to be a long day. Monday arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in a navy suit James had always liked, my good pearl earrings and sensible pumps. Looking in the mirror, I saw not the victim Sophie had tried to create, but the woman James had loved. Strong, dignified, determined. Evelyn drove me to the courthouse. Maria and Thomas were waiting outside, faces grim but supportive. "We're here for you, Helen," Maria said, hugging me tight. "That woman is poison." Inside, the courtroom was nearly empty. Just a few court officers, our legal teams, and a judge who looked like she'd seen it all before. Sophie sat with her cousin Harris and another attorney I didn't recognize. Brandon wasn't present. Sophie had made an effort to look demure and concerned. Simple dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, the grieving daughter-in-law worried about her husband's mentally unstable mother. Judge Carol Winters, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, called the court to order. "We're here on the matter of Chambers versus Chambers, petition for emergency conservatorship." She peered over her glasses at Sophie. "Ms. Chambers, you're alleging that your mother-in-law, Helen Chambers, is mentally incompetent and requires immediate guardianship for her own protection. Is that correct?" Harris stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My client has documented a pattern of increasingly erratic behavior, paranoid delusions, and financial irresponsibility that poses a danger to Mrs. Chambers' well-being." Judge Winters turned to Charles. "In your response, Mr. Bennett?" "Your Honor, not only do we contest these absurd allegations, but we have evidence that Sophie Chambers and her husband Brandon have been systematically defrauding Mrs. Helen Chambers for years. This petition is a transparent attempt to gain control of assets they've been unsuccessfully trying to steal through more direct means." Sophie gasped theatrically. Harris looked outraged. "Your Honor, these slanderous accusations—" "Save it," Judge Winters cut him off. "I've reviewed the filings from both sides. Let's start with the medical evaluations. Mrs. Chambers' primary physician, Dr. Lillian Patel, has submitted a thorough evaluation, finding her mentally competent and showing no signs of cognitive decline beyond normal aging. Ms. Sophie Chambers has submitted nothing, no medical evaluation whatsoever." "We have documented incidents," Harris began. "Documented by whom? Not by medical professionals?" Judge Winters looked distinctly unimpressed. "Now, regarding these allegations of fraud, Mr. Bennett has submitted substantial evidence, credit reports showing unauthorized accounts, loan documents with apparently forged signatures, and a forensic accountant's analysis showing systematic financial abuse. What's your response to this evidence, Mr. Harris?" Harris shifted uncomfortably. "We haven't had adequate time to review these claims, Your Honor. We believe they're fabricated out of Mrs. Chambers' paranoid delusions." "Fabricated?" Charles interjected. "Your Honor, we have bank records showing transfers from fraudulently obtained loans directly to Sophie and Brandon Chambers' accounts. We have evidence that they used Mrs. Chambers' house as collateral without her knowledge or consent. We have recordings of Sophie Chambers admitting to these activities and threatening Mrs. Chambers." "Recordings can be manipulated," Harris argued, desperately. "Indeed they can," Judge Winters agreed, "which is why I've had them independently verified by the court's technical expert. They appear genuine." Sophie's face had gone from concerned to furious. She whispered urgently to Harris, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Charles continued, "not only do we ask that this petition be dismissed, but we request a protective order preventing Sophie and Brandon Chambers from contacting Mrs. Helen Chambers except through counsel, pending resolution of the criminal charges being filed against them." Criminal charges? Sophie couldn't contain herself. This is ridiculous. We took her in when no one else would. We've cared for her for 3 years. Ms. Chambers, Judge Winters warned, you'll have your chance to speak. But Sophie was beyond control now. She's lying. She's confused. Ask anyone. She wanders at night, forgets appointments, can't manage her medications. Yet she managed to gather extensive evidence of your fraudulent activities, Judge Winters observed dryly, curious how her mental faculties seem to improve when it comes to protecting herself. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Winters reviewed her notes for several long minutes, then looked up. I'm dismissing this petition for conservatorship. There is no credible evidence that Helen Chambers requires guardianship. In fact, the evidence suggests that the petitioner, Sophie Chambers, has engaged in a pattern of behavior that would make her categorically unsuitable as a guardian, even if such protection were needed. Sophie made a strangled sound of protest. Furthermore, Judge Winters continued, I'm granting the protective order. Neither Sophie nor Brandon Chambers is to contact Helen Chambers except through counsel until the criminal matters are resolved. I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible perjury in these proceedings, in addition to the fraud allegations already under investigation. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. As we stood to leave, Sophie lunged toward me, her face contorted with rage. This isn't over. You'll regret this. I swear to God. Court officers quickly intervened, escorting her from the courtroom. Her threats echoed down the hallway outside. Charles squeezed my shoulder. First hurdle cleared. You did well in there, Helen. I didn't have to do anything, I said, still processing what had happened. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand your ground. Sophie, self-destructed because she couldn't imagine a world where she doesn't get her way. Maria hugged me. I always knew that woman was trouble. The way she treated you at family gatherings was always so condescending. Thomas nodded. Brandon should have put a stop to it years ago. James would never have stood for someone treating you that way. The mention of James brought tears to my eyes. He would have been so disappointed in Brandon. Yes, he would, Charles agreed solemnly. But he would have been incredibly proud of you. As we walked to the car, Patricia called with an update on the financial investigation. We've traced the money, she said without preamble. They've spent most of it. The pool, kitchen renovation, Sophie's car, luxury vacations. But we found about $30,000 in a hidden account under Sophie's maiden name. We've petitioned to freeze that as well. What about my house, the one they're living in? That's more complicated. They used your equity for the down payment, but they have been making the mortgage payments. The court will likely determine an ownership percentage based on contributions. I thought about the house, beautiful but tainted by betrayal. I don't want it. I want my own house back. That's completely understandable. We'll work toward that resolution. That evening, I received a text from Brandon. Please, Mom, let's talk this out. Sophie's hysterical. Our accounts are frozen. We can't even buy groceries. I showed it to Charles, who advised against responding directly. Instead, he drafted a message from his office. All communication must go through counsel. Per court order, any direct contact will be reported as a violation. Brandon's reply came minutes later. Mom, I know you're reading these. Please, we're family. Family. The word that had kept me silent, kept me accepting less than I deserved, kept me vulnerable to their manipulation. Not anymore. I turned off my phone and looked out the hotel window at the city lights. Tomorrow, I would go to my real home in Riverside Heights. The locks were changed, the security system updated. It would need cleaning. Some repairs, perhaps, but it was mine. No one could take that away from me. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The weeks leading up to the criminal trial were a whirlwind of depositions, evidence gathering, and legal preparations. Charles had assembled a formidable team, including Patricia Wong and a specialist in elder abuse cases named Marcus Delgado. Elder abuse is one of the most underreported crimes in America, Marcus explained during our strategy meeting. Financial exploitation is particularly insidious because it's often perpetrated by family members, making victims reluctant to come forward. Exactly, Patricia agreed. The average victim loses $120,000, but most cases never make it to court because of shame or fear. I'm not ashamed, I said firmly, and I'm done being afraid. Charles smiled. That's why we're going to win. Meanwhile, Brandon and Sophie had hired a high-powered defense attorney named Vivian Reynolds, known for aggressive tactics and media manipulation. Within days of taking the case, stories began appearing in local news about family disagreements, escalating to criminal charges and the tragedy of aging parents turning against their children. Sophie gave tearful interviews, claiming she'd only been trying to protect me from myself. Helen has been increasingly confused, she told one reporter, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. We were trying to secure her finances before she gave everything away to scammers. This is how she repays our love. Charles advised me to ignore the media circus. They're trying to poison the jury pool and pressure you into dropping the charges. Don't engage. It was harder to ignore the text messages from my grandchildren, clearly composed with Sophie's help, asking why I was being mean to their mommy and daddy. My heart broke reading them, but Charles was adamant that any response would violate the protective order and undermine our case. The hardest blow came when Rachel called to say she wouldn't be coming for the trial after all. I just can't take sides, Mom, she explained, her voice strained. Brandon's my brother, you're my mother. I love you both. This isn't about taking sides, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is about right and wrong. What they did was criminal. Maybe so, but pressing charges? Couldn't you have found another way to resolve this? I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. What would you have suggested? Allowing them to steal my identity, to take my house, to have me declared incompetent, and shipped off to a nursing home? You're exaggerating. No, Rachel, I'm not. That was their plan. They admitted it. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Rachel sighed. I'm sorry, Mom. I just can't do this right now. After we hung up, I sat on my bed in the Riverside Heights house, my true home, and allowed myself to cry. For the family I thought I had, for the son who'd betrayed me, for the daughters who couldn't stand with me when I needed them most. Evelyn found me there, having let herself in with the spare key I'd given her. Oh, Helen, she said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. What happened? I told her about Rachel's call, my voice breaking. Family? Evelyn shook her head. They can hurt us like no one else because we love them like no one else. I don't know if I can go through with this, I admitted. The trial, the publicity, having to face them in court. Of course you can, Evelyn said firmly. You're Helen Chambers. You raised 3 children while supporting a husband through military service. You nursed James through cancer. You're the strongest woman I know. I smiled weakly. I don't feel very strong right now. Strength isn't about not feeling pain, Evelyn said, squeezing my hand. It's about continuing despite it. The criminal. Trial began on a rainy Tuesday in March. The courtroom was more crowded than the conservatorship hearing had been. Local media, curious onlookers, and to my surprise, Amanda sitting in the back row. Our eyes met briefly as I walked to the plaintiff's table. She nodded slightly, and I felt a glimmer of hope. At least one of my daughters had found her conscience. Sophie and Brandon sat at the defense table, both dressed conservatively. Sophie looked appropriately somber, while Brandon appeared genuinely miserable. Neither would meet my gaze. The charges were read: fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, attempted grand larceny. Sophie and Brandon both pleaded not guilty. In his opening statement, Charles laid out the case methodically. This is not a family squabble that got out of hand, he told the jury. This was a calculated, years-long campaign to systematically strip Helen Chambers of her assets, her dignity, and ultimately her freedom. The evidence will show that Sophie and Brandon Chambers forged documents, opened fraudulent accounts, and attempted to have Mrs. Chambers declared incompetent, all to gain control of her home and savings. Vivian Reynolds countered with emotional appeals. The Chambers family took in an aging widow when no one else would, she argued. They provided a home, care, and companionship for 3 years. Yes, financial arrangements were made with Helen's verbal consent, though perhaps not always. With proper documentation. These weren't crimes. They were misunderstandings within a loving family that have been tragically escalated. The evidence phase was grueling. Financial records were dissected. Forensic analysts testified about the forged signatures. Recordings of Sophie's threats were played. My neighbor Dorothy testified about Sophie and Brandon claiming to have power of attorney. Even Sophie's cousin Harris was compelled to testify about his role in preparing fraudulent documents. Then it was my turn to take the stand. As I walked to the witness box, I caught sight of Amanda in the gallery, now sitting beside Maria and Thomas. She gave me a small, encouraging smile. Under Charles's gentle questioning, I recounted everything from James's death to moving in with Brandon. The initial warmth giving way to isolation and gaslighting, discovering the fraud, and the final confrontation at Thanksgiving. Mrs. Chambers, Charles asked, why did you decide to press charges against your own son and daughter-in-law? I took a deep breath. Because what they did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. They systematically stole from me while pretending to care for me. They planned to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized so they could take everything I have. If I didn't stand up for myself, who would? Charles nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. Vivian Reynolds approached for cross-examination, her smile sympathetic, but her eyes calculating. Mrs. Chambers, isn't it true that you resented Sophie's success, her promotion, her income, her influence over your son? I resented her theft, I replied calmly. Her lies, her attempt to steal my home and destroy my credit. Success built on crime isn't success. It's just crime with better clothes. A few jurors nodded, and Vivian's smile tightened. You claim? Brandon and Sophie were planning to have you declared incompetent. Yet, you've presented no direct evidence of this plan. Isn't this just your interpretation of events? Sophie filed for emergency conservatorship the day after I confronted them about the fraud. I pointed out she claimed I was mentally unstable and needed immediate guardianship, her guardianship. The court rejected her petition because there was no evidence of my incompetence. That seems like direct evidence to me. Vivian shifted tactics. Mrs. Chambers, you lived in Brandon and Sophie's home for 3 years without contributing to household expenses. Isn't it reasonable that they eventually asked you to pay rent? I would have been happy to pay a reasonable rent if asked, but $2,300 for a bedroom when they were simultaneously stealing from me and planning to take my house? No, that wasn't reasonable. That was part of their scheme to financially drain me, so I'd have no resources to fight back. The cross-examination continued for hours, with Vivian trying every angle to portray me as ungrateful, resentful, or confused. But Charles had prepared me well. I remained calm, answering directly and clearly, refusing to be baited into emotional outbursts. By the time I stepped down, I was exhausted but satisfied. I had spoken my truth. Brandon testified next, his testimony, a stark contrast to my composed responses. He alternated between remorse and deflection, claiming he'd known about some financial arrangements, but not others, that he'd been caught between loyalty to his wife and his mother. I never meant for it to go this far, he said, voice breaking. I just wanted everyone to be happy. Even if that meant stealing from your mother? Charles asked during cross-examination. Brandon hung his head. I made terrible mistakes. I'm so sorry. Sophie's testimony was the most dramatic, perfectly dressed and coiffed. She presented herself as the caring daughter-in-law blindsided by an ungrateful mother-in-law's accusations. We took her in when no one else would, she insisted. Her daughters were too busy with their own lives. We gave her a home, included her in our family. Yes, we used her home equity with her verbal permission to create a better living situation for everyone, including her. And the credit cards opened in her name? Charles asked. Did you have verbal permission for those too? Helen said we could handle her finances, Sophie replied smoothly. She was finding it all too confusing. We were trying to help. By charging $20,000 for designer clothes, spa treatments, and a vacation to Cabo that Mrs. Chambers wasn't invited on? Charles pressed. Sophie's composure slipped momentarily. Those were legitimate family expenses. For your family, perhaps, not for Mrs. Chambers. The most damning moment came when Charles played the recording of Sophie after the conservatorship hearing. This isn't over. You'll regret this. I swear to God. Does that sound like a concerned daughter-in-law trying to help? Charles asked the jury. Or someone furious that their scheme has been exposed after days of testimony? The case went to the jury. They deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a verdict. On the count of fraud in the first degree, how do you find the defendant Sophie Chambers? Guilty. On the count of identity theft in the first degree? Guilty. The litany continued. Guilty on all counts for Sophie, guilty of accomplice charges for Brandon. I sat in the gallery feeling hollow vindication. Justice. But at what cost? My son in handcuffs, my daughter-in-law spitting venom as they led her. Away! This isn't over, Sophie shouted. You vindictive! You've ruined everything! No, I said quietly, though she couldn't hear me. You ruined everything. I just refuse to let you bury me in the wreckage. Outside the courthouse, Amanda approached, hesitantly. Mom, I'm sorry I wasn't here from the beginning. I should have believed you. I studied my younger daughter's face, seeing genuine remorse. Yes, you should have. Can we talk? Maybe over dinner? I considered refusing, making her work harder for forgiveness. But hadn't there been enough pain already? Dinner would be nice, I said finally. I'd like to hear about the twins. She smiled, relief evident in her eyes. They ask about you all the time. They miss their grandma. As we walked to her car, reporters shouted questions that I ignored. This victory wasn't for public consumption. It was personal, painful, and private. The sentencing came weeks later. Sophie received 5 years, eligible for parole in 3. Brandon got 18 months, mostly probation. Restitution was ordered. For both, they'd be paying me back for decades. Outside the courthouse, Charles shook my hand. You did it, Helen. You won. Had I? My family was shattered, my son a criminal, one daughter estranged, but I was free. I was safe. I was home. Yes, I said, realizing it was true despite everything. Finally, I won. Spring arrived with unexpected beauty. The house in Riverside Heights came back to life as I cleared away dust and neglect. I planted James's favorite rose bushes along the back fence, repainted the kitchen a cheerful yellow, and slowly reclaimed each room as my own. The pool Sophie had installed in the other house was sold with the property. I wanted nothing from that chapter of my life. The proceeds, after paying off the fraudulent mortgage, went into a trust for my grandchildren's education. They weren't responsible for their parents' crimes. Amanda and I rebuilt our relationship carefully, like archaeologists excavating a fragile artifact. Weekly phone calls became dinner visits, then occasional weekends with the twins. She'd apologized properly, acknowledging how she'd failed me when I needed her. I was so wrapped up in my own problems, she admitted one evening as we sat on my patio. It was easier to believe Brandon than to consider that something terrible was happening to you. We all make choices, I said, watching the sunset paint the sky in pinks and golds. What matters is what we do after we realize our mistakes. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm trying, Mom." "I know, and I'm proud of you for that." Rachel was slower to come around. Her divorce had left her bitter and defensive, quick to see betrayal everywhere except where it actually existed. Our conversations remained strained, but there was progress. Small steps. Brandon wrote from prison long, rambling letters full of apologies and explanations. I read them, searching for the son I'd raised in the words of the man who betrayed me. Sometimes I caught glimpses of him. Other times he seemed like a stranger. I wrote back occasionally, keeping my responses measured. Forgiveness would take time, if it came at all. Trust might never be fully restored. Sophie sent no letters, made no apologies. According to Brandon, she blamed me entirely for their downfall. In her mind, she was the victim of my ingratitude, my vindictiveness, my refusal to quietly accept my place as an aging burden to be managed. My grandchildren were the greatest. Casualty, with Brandon in prison and Sophie's parents taking custody. I rarely saw them. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, but kept my distance, not wanting to confuse them further. Someday, when they were older, when they could understand that Grandma wasn't the villain in their story, perhaps we'd reconnect. One sunny afternoon in late April, Evelyn and I were having tea on my patio when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Amanda and the twins, along with a woman I didn't recognize. "Mom," Amanda said, a nervous smile on her face. "This is Dr. Lisa Wong. She's a family therapist who specializes in elder issues and family reconciliation. I thought maybe she could help us, all of us." Dr. Wong extended her hand. "Mrs. Chambers, it's an honor to meet you. Your case has actually become something of a landmark in elder rights advocacy. Would you be willing to talk about how we might help your family heal?" I looked at my daughter's hopeful face, at my grandchildren's curious eyes, at this professional who thought my broken family might be mendable. "Come in," I said, opening the door wider. "We can talk in the living room." Over the next several months, Dr. Wong guided us through difficult conversations. Amanda and I worked through her abandonment when I needed her. We discussed Brandon's choices and how they affected everyone. We even had sessions with Rachel when she finally visited. Tense at first, but gradually productive. Dr. Wong helped me see that while Sophie had been the primary architect of the fraud, my children's neglect had roots in how I'd raised them. "You were always the giver, the supporter," she pointed out gently. "You taught them that Mom handles everything. Mom never needs help. Mom exists to solve their problems. When you finally needed them, they didn't know how to respond because they'd never practiced caring for you." It was a hard truth to accept, but a necessary one for healing. On the anniversary of James's death, I visited his grave with flowers and news. "I did it," I told the headstone. "Fought back, won. The house is safe." Wind rustled the trees, and I swear I heard his laugh. "That's my Helen. Tougher than you look." "I miss you every day," I whispered, "but I'm okay. Better than okay." I arranged the flowers, straightened the little American flag by his marker. I'm home. And I was not just in the physical house, but in myself. The woman who'd been diminished, dismissed, nearly destroyed, had found her spine, had remembered her worth, had refused to go quietly into anyone's good night. As months passed, my life took on new rhythms. I volunteered at the local senior center, sharing my story and helping others recognize signs of financial exploitation. I joined a widow's support group, making friends who understood the unique challenges of rebuilding a life alone. Charles Bennett and I remained in touch, occasionally meeting for lunch to discuss the ongoing legal aftermath of my case. The restitution payments came monthly, small amounts but steady. Sophie's wages in prison were garnished, Brandon's too, after his release. Every penny they sent felt like validation. "You tried to rob me, but now you pay me." Justice has a certain poetry. Brandon was released early for good behavior after serving 10 months. He sent another letter asking to meet to reconcile. This time his words seemed different, more reflective, less self-pitying. "I've been in therapy," he wrote, "really working on understanding how I failed you, how I let Sophie control me, how I chose the easy path instead of the right one. Please, Mom, let me try to make amends." I thought about it for weeks, asked Evelyn, Maria, and Dr. Wong for advice. The responses were mixed, but ultimately, the choice was mine. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop, neutral, safe. He looked older, thinner, worn down by consequences. Good growth hurts. "Mom," he stood when I arrived, uncertainty in every line of his body. "Thank you for coming." I sat, ordered tea, and studied my son. "You have 10 minutes. He talked fast. Therapy. Revelations, codependency issues, the toxic dynamic with Sophie, his shame over betraying me, all probably true, all definitely too late. "I want to earn your forgiveness," he finished. "Whatever it takes. Forgiveness isn't earned." I sipped my tea. "It's given or not." "I forgive you, Brandon. For my peace, not yours. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, doesn't mean trusting, doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. I understand. But maybe with time." "No." I set down my cup. "I'll be civil. I'll send Christmas cards. I might even answer if you call. But the relationship we had, the mother who'd sacrificed everything for you, she's gone. You killed her when you stayed silent at that Thanksgiving dinner." He cried then. My son, who'd inherited his father's eyes but not his courage. I felt nothing. The part of me that would have rushed to comfort him had died somewhere between freeloader and forged signatures. "I'm still your mother," I said, standing. "But now I'm my own person first. Remember that." I left him there with his cold coffee and hot tears. It wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Boundaries aren't walls. They're the fence that makes good neighbors possible, even when those neighbors are your children. The divorce was finalized while Sophie was in prison. Brandon got the kids alternate weekends, supervised at first. He sent pictures sometimes. Ryan taller, Emily losing baby teeth. I kept them, but didn't display them. Someday, maybe. Not yet. Rachel visited for Thanksgiving. Just her, quiet and careful, helping me cook in the kitchen I'd painted yellow after returning home. "Dad would have been proud of you," she said suddenly, peeling apples for pie. "For fighting back, for standing up. He would have been sad it was necessary. I know I failed you when you needed me." She met my eyes. "But watching you fight, seeing you refuse to be victimized, it changed something in me too. I stopped accepting. Less than I deserved in my own life. Good, and I meant it. That's what mothers really want. Children who know their own worth." Amanda came for Christmas, bringing the twins, watching my grandchildren play in the backyard where their father had once played. Their laughter echoing off the fence James had built felt like healing. Not complete. Some wounds leave permanent marks, but healing nonetheless. "Grandma," one twin asked, "why don't we see Daddy very much anymore?" "Sometimes," I said carefully. "People make choices that change relationships, but that doesn't mean we stop loving them. We just love them differently, like from far away." Exactly like that. Children understand more than we credit. They accepted it and went back to playing. Life moves forward even when we're looking back. New Year's Eve found me surrounded by friends, Evelyn, Maria, and Thomas, neighbors who'd become family, fellow volunteers from the senior center. We toasted at midnight to survival, to strength, to refusing to be silenced. "What's your resolution?" Evelyn asked. "No more resolutions," I said. "Just promises to myself. To never again shrink to make others comfortable. To never apologize for taking up space. To never let anyone make me feel worthless in my own home." "Here, here," the chorus went up. Glasses clinked. These people who'd stood by me when family hadn't, who'd witnessed my humiliation and cheered my triumph, who proved that family isn't about DNA, it's about showing up. The party lasted until 2 a.m. I cleaned up slowly, savoring the echoes of laughter in my home. This house had seen so much love and betrayal, theft and justice, loss and reclamation, but it was mine, every wall, every memory being made. I stood in my kitchen, my beautiful sun-yellow kitchen, and made one last toast. To James, who'd left me more than a house. He'd left me the tools to protect it, to myself for finally using them, to the future, whatever it held. I'm Helen Chambers, I said to the empty room, to the ghosts of what had been, to the promise of what could be. I'm 71 years old. I own my home. I know my worth, and I'm exactly where I belong. The house settled around me, safe and solid. Through the window, dawn was breaking. A new day, a new year, a new life built on the ashes of the old. I was home. 6 months later, life had settled into new rhythms. I woke each morning in my own bedroom, made coffee in my yellow kitchen, tended James's roses in the garden. The house that had nearly been stolen had become my sanctuary, restored. My case had attracted attention beyond what I'd expected. A producer from a local news station contacted me about participating in a documentary on elder financial abuse. "Your story could help so many people, Mrs. Chambers," she explained over coffee in my living room. "Most victims never come forward because of shame or fear of family conflict. You fought back and won. That's powerful." I hesitated, uncertain about exposing my family's ugliness to a wider audience. It was painful enough living through it once. "I understand," she said gently, "but your experience could be the warning sign that saves someone else from the same fate." Put that way, how could I refuse? The documentary titled Hidden Theft, Elder Abuse in American Families premiered that fall. I watched it with Evelyn, both of us crying at different points. Seeing my story laid out so clinically, the gradual isolation, the financial manipulation, the gaslighting, made me realize how textbook the abuse had been. If only I'd recognized the signs earlier. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from seniors in similar situations, from adult children horrified to recognize their own behavior in Sophie's actions, from law enforcement and social workers grateful for the awareness. Charles called the day after it aired. "You've started something, Helen. The DA's office has received a surge of calls from elderly victims reporting financial abuse. They're calling it the Chambers effect." "I just told my story," I said, surprised. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person brave enough to speak their truth so others know they're not alone. The senior center where I volunteered asked if I'd consider starting a support group specifically for victims of financial exploitation. I agreed, though I didn't feel qualified. "You lived it," the director said simply. "That's qualification enough." Our first meeting had 3 attendees, all women, all with stories that echoed mine in different ways. A daughter who drained bank accounts, a nephew who'd stolen jewelry, a son-in-law who'd pressured his mother-in-law into signing over her house. "I thought it was just me," one woman whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was stupid for trusting my own child." "It's never stupid to expect decency from family," I told her. "The failure is theirs, not yours." By our 3rd meeting, attendance had doubled. By the 6th, we needed a larger room. People weren't just coming for support. They were coming for strength, for the courage to take action. With Charles's help, I developed resources for the group, checklists for protecting assets, signs of financial exploitation to watch for, contact information for legal aid, scripts for confronting family members about concerning behavior. "You found your calling," Evelyn observed one evening as we sorted through resource packets for the next meeting. "Not a calling I would have chosen," I admitted. "But if my pain can prevent someone else's, maybe it wasn't wasted." Brandon attended one of these meetings, sitting quietly in the back. I hadn't invited him. I hadn't even known he was coming. Afterward, he approached hesitantly. "That was powerful," he said, looking around at the empty chairs. All these people with stories. Like ours. Not like ours, I corrected. In our story, you were the abuser, not the victim. He flinched, but nodded. I know. That's why I came. To understand better, to hear what it's like from the other side. I studied him, looking for signs of the manipulative tactics Sophie had used so effectively, but his eyes held only sorrow and what appeared to be genuine remorse. Why now? I asked. I'm trying to rebuild my life, he said simply. I can't do that without understanding how I destroyed yours. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. A crack in the wall between us, a possibility. There's a book I can recommend, I said finally, about making amends that actually help the person you hurt, not just soothe your own guilt. I'd like that, he said. And for a moment, I glimpsed the son I'd raised. Thank you, Mom. As he turned to leave, I called after him. How are the children? Missing their grandmother, he said. Emily keeps your Christmas card on her nightstand. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Some wounds were still too fresh. The restitution checks continued to arrive monthly. Small amounts, but steady. I used most of it to fund our support group activities, turning Sophie's theft into something positive, poetic justice. Rachel moved back to town that summer, taking a teaching position at the local community college. We had dinner weekly, our relationship healing through consistent effort on both sides. I'm thinking of starting a group for adult children of elder abuse victims, she told me one evening. So many of us don't know how to support our parents through something like this. I want to change that. My heart swelled with pride. My daughter had not only learned from my pain, she was working to prevent others from experiencing it. Amanda brought the twins for regular visits now. They'd grown so much, developing their own personalities and interests. Ryan loved building things, just like his grandfather. Emily had inherited my love of gardening. We planted sunflowers together, measuring their growth each week. They're reaching for the sky, Grandma, she said in wonder, her small hand in mine as we looked up at the towering stalks. Yes, they are, I agreed. That's what living things do when they're nurtured properly. They grow toward the light. On my 72nd birthday, they threw me a surprise party. Amanda, Rachel, the grandchildren, Evelyn, Maria, and Thomas, my friends from the senior center and support group. Even Brandon was there, standing awkwardly to the side, but present. Speech! Someone called after I'd blown out the candles. I looked around at these faces, some related by blood, others by choice, and felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to my eyes. 3 years ago, I began. I thought my life was essentially over. I'd lost James, lost my independence, lost my sense of purpose. I was existing, not living. I took a breath. Then came the betrayal that nearly destroyed me. But instead, it rebuilt me, stronger, wiser, more authentic. I raised my glass. I've learned that family isn't just who shares your DNA. It's who shares your values. It's who shows up when you need them. It's who tells you the truth even when it's hard to hear. My eyes met Brandon's briefly. He nodded, acknowledging the rebuke and the challenge. I've learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, that knowing your worth is the greatest protection against those who would diminish you, that the most powerful word in any language is no when spoken to those who would exploit you. I smiled at my support group members and added, I've learned that pain shared is pain diminished, that helping others heal can heal you too. That purpose can be found in the darkest experiences if you're brave enough to use them for good. I raised my glass higher. So, here's to 72 years of life, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the painful, all of it mine, all of it valuable, all of it making me exactly who I am today, and I wouldn't change a thing. The room erupted in applause. Evelyn hugged me, whispering, James would be bursting with pride. Later, as guests were leaving, Brandon approached with a small package. "It's not much," he said, handing it to me. "Just something I thought you should have back." Inside was my old house key, the one to this house that I'd given him when I moved out 3 years ago. With it was a note. "This belongs to you, always has. I'm sorry I forgot that." I looked up at my son, this man who'd hurt me so deeply, but who was trying in his imperfect way to make amends. "Thank you," I said simply, pocketing the key and the note. It wasn't reconciliation, not completely, but it was acknowledgement of my ownership, my boundaries, my worth. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat on my porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the yard. James and I had spent countless evenings here, planning our future, discussing our children, simply being together in comfortable silence. "We did all right, didn't we, James?" I said to the night air. "Despite everything, we built something that couldn't be stolen or destroyed." The wind chimes he'd hung years ago tinkled softly in response. I smiled, feeling his presence, not as a ghost, but as the foundation of everything I'd become. I was Helen Chambers. I was 72 years old. I owned my home free and clear. I knew my worth beyond any doubt, and I was exactly where I belonged. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. Thank you for watching. Love you.